Hey guys, it's Vince. I wanted to cover a couple things that I've noticed. A lot of you know or have been gracious enough to purchase some graphics from me. I've been noticing as I've been going online a little more that and reviewing some work after researching for other projects, especially on planes, that there's quite a few graphic sites that are not selling scale graphics. And when I say that, I mean that they are not paying attention to the level of detail that they should be when selling you guys graphics that are supposed to be used to replicate the scale models that you're hoping to do. Um, that being said, I put together an example, and I want to show you some things of what to watch for, and better educate you on, especially if you're spending, the kind of money most of these sites are asking for on graphics. What I really want you to pay attention to, so that you're a little more educated and you get the product that you're hoping to create. I know when most guys are going to create a scale model, they are looking at every detail. I mean, they want it to be precise, and they should. I mean, it's not cheap. They're spending, lots of man hours to get that model just right, and that's why we love the hobby. You're trying to replicate a piece of history, be it, whether it's a plane of today or play of yesteryear. That's what we're trying to do. So that being said, it kind of irritates me when I see companies that a lot of graphics companies that come out and think that they're replicating scale graphics when they are not, and yet they're charging you a premium on that. So this demonstration is going to show exactly what I'm talking about and show the level of detail that I feel that you will see, and it will definitely pay off in the long run, especially if you're entering your plane in any type of masters competition or scale competition. These are the things you really want to be careful of. It'll save you time, it'll save you money and hassle. So without further ado, I'm going to go in and I want to show you a plane that I personally love. It's the MigMan Marine. I believe it's John Glenn's F-86. And I was working on a project, and this is the actual plane scale picture. Anybody can review these pictures, pull them up on Google, and you can see you have all the graphics. You have the interior graphics. You have the stars and bars. One of the toughest things to match on this plane is the font. Okay, the font is not a regularly used font. It's not the typical Air Force font. It's a very intricate design, and honestly, to date, I believe it's the only font I've seen used on the or in this era of model. I've never seen a plane with this type of font on it, with the hash, especially with the F's. If you look at the F's, it's a very narrow font, and most of it is stenciled. If you look closely, other than right here on the wing, if you've ever seen the real plane, it's actually stenciled on most of it. And again, the tail letters, tail numbers on the tail, you're going to find that as well. Over here, all of this will be stenciled. Okay, if we come over to another picture of her, a side profile, you can see again, all of this right here would be stenciled, and this would be solid. Why I'm saying that is, like I said, there's quite a few guys, or quite a few companies, I should say, that are selling graphics, trying to claim that they're replicating this design, and they are not. And now I'm going to show you the difference. Okay, I get asked all the time, what can I do? And I'm going to show you what I can do. Okay, what you're seeing here is the graphics of that plane, and they are scaled correctly. If you look at the font, they are scaled correctly. If you, and this again is the U.S. Air Force for the wing. If you come over here and we validate that, you can see everything is correct right down to the F hash marks. The other thing I want you to pay really close attention to, and of course the tail numbers are the same, what I really want you to pay close attention to is the MigMan Marine and the Lynn Annie Dave. I want you to pay close attention to that as well, because if you look at the MigMan Marine, one of the things I like to do with anything that's supposed to be hand painted is I try never to retouch too much any of the red or any type of color that makes up the scrolling or the font of the hand paint jobs, because the one thing guys mostly forget with scale graphics is that nothing in this era was perfect. you were dealing in a wartime where guys that were painting their planes were doing it with stenciling. So nothing would be virtually perfect. If you got close to the plane, you'd see imperfections. I mean, that's what made them them. It's what made history history. They were flying a piece of history, and at the time, they made do with what they had. So a lot of their crew members, they would rely on them to either stencil or themselves to stencil and paint their planes. Being imperfect makes it perfect. So what you're seeing here, I never try to retouch too much any of these. Now, one of the big things are, especially with this, you can see the design here is absolutely flawless. If we come over here, the rendition, especially on the side profile, and I'll pull that up real quick, the rendition is dead on. I mean, it's all to scale. So if we come into an even higher resolution picture, you can see right down to the shadowing, it's scale. His kills, their scale. Major Glenn, its scale. All of this is in flawless fashion. That being said, now that you've seen the difference, and I'm going to scroll back and I want to show you even the tail. All of the tail art I've locked. And what I mean by locked is this art is locked and scaled together so that your tail numbers and everything move congruently. If I shrink or go up and down, everything is going to move symmetrically to give us the effect we want. I'm going to zoom in now. I'm at 48%. You can see that here. I'm going to zoom in and I'll show you what I mean by imperfect. If you look closely, you will see these letters are not perfect. They are stenciled, just like they would be on the scale aircraft for a plane of that era. Okay, there is, again, and I will reinstate this because a lot of guys, I think, miss this detail. And when I say they miss the detail, they're looking forward to graphicking a scale plane, but what they don't take into consideration is don't make everything perfect. If you have a guy who's making or producing graphics and all he's doing is taking a stenciling and making it absolutely perfect, you're kind of missing the edge of the plane. You're missing that extra 5% of detail. The real detail comes from the graphics being done accurately, but not just being done accurately. You're looking for the perfect imperfections. And the perfect imperfections I always look for is the stenciling. If stenciling is done to where it's absolutely flawlessly perfect, then I would say, you're really not reproducing a 100% scale model. So what I always try to do is, especially on a font like this, you can see the S is not absolutely perfect, but it's stenciled. It's no different than if you were to take a stencil and do it, you would get that same effect. And that's what we're really looking for. But what I always like to try to do is I will use, especially on these hard to find fonts, this is a very difficult font to find, especially if you see the slash and the A. These are not easy to find, and some of the fonts are quite expensive. Not to mention, you may buy the font, and then it's perfect again. So if you buy the font and it's perfect, you're kind of losing that edge again. So what I end up doing, and it takes more time, and that's why most guys won't do it, is I retrace every line of the font, so that you're not only getting the scale font, you're getting the imperfections with the scale font, which means your plane will be separated from those at the field. If you had a plane that is designed by 9 out of 10 of the other graphics producers you see online, they are not doing that. They're not looking at it from a modeler's perspective. They're looking at it as, I've reproduced something very, very close and you'll buy it and be happy with it. Well, you might, and so be it. But again, I like doing things different. I like being as precise as possible, and I enjoy the hobby, and I truly enjoy doing scale projects, and for that reason, because that's what it's about, is reproducing a piece of history, essentially just downsized. So if you look at these, and I'll go down here, and if you look at these fonts, you will see the same thing, because all of this was stenciled on the plane. None of this was done with perfect graphics at that time. They didn't use plotters. They didn't have access to any of this stuff. So why would the font ever be perfect on these planes? You have to think like that if you're doing a real scale project. And I really cannot emphasize that enough. You're always looking for, like, I guess it's kind of weird to say, but it makes perfect sense, is that perfect imperfection. You want it to be perfect in the time frame, and you want it to be imperfect in the sense that what they were doing was decorating their planes with what they had. And then what they had was a hand and usually a stencil and some paint, and that's what they did. Even the planes that we see in the museums, they're restored at a different quality level than they were in the airfield. I mean, you have to use common sense with that. So just some things to take and pay close attention to. If you guys ever do decide you want graphics and you message me and you say, hey, I want some nose art or I want some stuff done, if it's something that is custom and you say, hey, can you put brush strokes in? I can do that. I can make it look like it was hand painted. The graphic will be, again, perfectly imperfect to where it will represent that level of detail. That's what we're going for. This particular jet also had, I'm going to zoom really close in. You can see the danger ejection seat. These are all scaled. The rescues, these I actually did by hand. These are very basic stars and bars, of course, that's normal. But again, if you look, you could see the slight waviness to where the stencil would be, imperfectly placed on the plane. That's normal. That's all normal. And when you look at, and again, that's zooming in, over 170%. When you zoom out, you will see at about 100%, that's what she would resemble. And that is scale of that time. Now, you've seen it now in the sense of it being done correctly. This is the way these planes should be replicated if graphics are to be done. The tail feathers, I can tell you right now from the vertical stab, this is one of the toughest graphics to produce because each checkerboard box had to be reproduced, and you can see that the angle of cut had to be reproduced for the rudder as well as where it meets the other end of the vertical stab's graphic. So that's all been done along with color matching to the tail. So these are all color matched to the tail for Major Glenn's plane. And on top of that, once again, it can be scaled. So if you're building a bigger one, it can be scaled to a larger stab. If it's smaller, then it can be scaled to a smaller stab. The great thing is that all of this will be done with transfer tape, so you will not have to worry about alignment when it comes to the text or any of this. The transfer tape will hold this graphic and then it will place it on there. And again, all of the white space that you see will of course be cut out. And so the only thing you're left with is the checkerboard pattern. That being said, I'm going to show you now what I was discussing about incorrect graphics. You've seen it done correctly through the way I'm doing it. Now I'm going to show you the difference. If we look here, this is from a company, I'm not even going to say their name, you can see it right here. If you look right here, you see U.S. Air Force. And if you look at the plane, it's so interesting because the plane is so readily available online. You can see it does not have, the F's do not have the hash that they should have. You can also see that this is perfect. This is just a fonted perfect graphic. If you look over here, he did the same thing. If you look over here, he's got MigMad Marine. He's got all of this separate. He's got the Lin Ann and Dave. This is all incorrect as compared to this. I mean, this is all done. As a matter of fact, the top of the part of the tail is incorrect. I mean, it just shows you how you really got to be careful if you want scale. And this is what I always say. If you really want scale, it's harder to find real scale type graphics because what you're looking at typically is guys who are not familiar with replicating something like that. They're familiar with producing the graphic, but they're not really familiar in what a true modeler will look for. They will look for, if you guys all should be looking for that if you're paying for custom graphics to be made, because again, if it's going to be done right and you want that plane to really stand out, that's what's going to make it stand out. Those are the details that will make or break you at a competition or make or break you, with you looking at different things, the shading of the paint, the weathering, all of that stuff is what really adds that pop effect to, wow, I just stepped back in time. That's what we're looking for. So when I see guys like this doing shoddy work just to make a buck, I cannot help but publicize this because I want you guys not to spend your money. And it's really funny. What's really funny about this whole thing is if you look at the plane right here, you could see the hash marks on the tail, and you could see he obviously didn't even recognize or care to recognize that his text isn't even correct. It's not even in the same format. It's so perfect. It's ridiculous. It just shows that they just don't care about what they're producing. They're just kind of putting it out there. And the funny thing is, he's not cheap. I mean, it's not like these graphics are cheap. Now, the yellow, you'll notice the stripes I did not make. And the main reason I don't make them is because I personally feel that these type of intricate graphics where you're going to have a very sharp compound curve, it's understanding the material you're working with. I can make them out of vinyl. However, will they lay perfectly on your model? Most likely not, because you're dealing with a more complex curve, especially as you come across the fuse on the top and the bottom. You're probably better off replicating this in a monocoat or an ultra coat, because it'll contour to the model much more efficiently, and then simply using a black pinstripe to give you that feathered edge that it goes with. Now, that being said, what I can do is cut you templates for your monocoat to give you these symmetrical patterns. A lot of guys don't realize when you say you do graphics, my cutter, I can adjust the cutting force on. And if you're needing a template that you want cut, they're not going to be usually as cheap as graphics, because again, you're getting a template means I have to use more force and then I go through blades a little quicker. But it will give you the option to remake that pattern or to have that pattern forever. So if you ever want to reproduce it on another plane or use that same pattern again for a different project, you can. It will make your project a lot easier. Even if you wanted to paint this on, you could use that once again to outline and paint. If I know your project and I know what you want to do, I can do that. So again, it's all in, really looking at the project and making an assessment of what's the best way to accomplish that scale look. And to me, the scale look, if you're going to go out that route, if a guy's buying an F86 or buying a kit of an F86 and he's building it or building a scratch built, and he spent 3 or 4 100 hours on this kit, he wants to make sure it looks scale. And even for the guys that haven't spent that amount of time, sometimes they'll buy an ARF model and want it to look scale. You want to look for that stuff because it's going to make the difference. And I promise you, it might sound like I'm nitpicking. I'm really not. I look at it as, if you're going to do it right or don't do it. And it's one of those things to where, these planes were part of our history. And that's, I think, why we all love them so much, is that if you look at them like that, and especially when you go to scale, Warbird scale decals, where one of the biggest manufacturing companies is Model Masters for plastic kits. You'll find that Model Masters and other types of plastic kits that are out on the market, they typically replicate everything flawlessly. And when I say that, they're at a different design level than most. Matter of fact, you can even see here, and of course it's not legible, but this goes under the canopy, all of the writing and the scrolling. Unfortunately, they scale it down so far that it's non-legible. If you guys had this, you could see I didn't reproduce it because I can't reproduce what I can't read. So it's very difficult to do that. However, if you had this and I had the plane actually to deal with, or an actual scale picture of that, it would be dead on. So again, that to me is what makes the difference from scale to not scale. And it really pays to really identify that, because other graphics, like if you look here, again, this proves, and this person is selling graphics, there is a company that sells graphics, and it just shows you how loosely produced they are. Not to mention, if this piece that goes on the rudder, goes over the checkerboard pattern, is separate, do you know how hard that is to match up and make it look right, instead of making this all one piece and using transfer tape? It's like I said, it's all the devil's in the details, and I'm just trying to point out and make you guys more educated on the choices you make, especially when you're spending that kind of money and time. Really, any guy that's spending that kind of time in their plane, they want it to look right. So, and they want it to look right as easy as possible. Doing it this way, again, doing it in the perspective of a modeler, because I am a modeler, I look at it as I would want this all to be one piece. And the main reason, I would take the piece of transfer tape, cover this entire pattern with it, and once you apply it to your plane, all of this is all staged perfectly. So again, that's the right way to do it. I don't do anything. I would scale this up, or I scale it down depending upon the size of the model, and you're good to go. And it's no different than your text. Your text is the exact same way. This should be placed in one category. You can see how everything is joined together. This is the way it is on the plane. Why you would get somebody to produce it in this format, in this format where it's missing the eye. If you look here, it's got the eye, it's missing the eye. Again, just a poor replication of these graphics for this type of model. So just things to watch out for and pay attention to. And, guys, take pride in your work. I can't stress that enough. You work hard on your plane, you're going to spend your hard-earned money. The big thing here is that when your plane is done and you take it to the field and, it's graphic the right proper way, it's astounding. A lot of the guys that, and I love doing them because a lot of the guys that are older, have been in the war, remember that time frame, they'll look at it up close and be like, man, that's amazing. When I can produce that kind of work and I get, oh man, that's amazing. That's when I know that it's been done right. And that's the kind of passion that hopefully everybody has that they want to achieve at that level, especially when they're investing in a model like this. So once again, I did a short video just to educate you and show you the difference. If you guys have any questions, just message me. Everybody that's been supporting me, I really appreciate it. I plan on doing a couple more videos, but up until then, take care. Send me any messages. Thank you.